Hello everybody and welcome to Clydebridge station. There's a new grid on the block at Clydebridge. And this is it. 56135, Port of Tyne Authority. It carries rail freight coal, livery, first loco in the fleet to do so, and etched nameplates. But we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves here. I'll explain to you how I came about to have this machine later on in the programme. But it's worth, first of all, going and taking a look at the whole story of the Class 56. A lot of this you'll probably know, but there'll be a few things that you don't know. So I'll talk about that in this programme. Any comments, queries or suggestions, then please leave them in the comments below, and I'll do a quick running shot at the end of this locomotive taking this empty stock train into the station. So if you're all ready, all aboard and enjoy the programme. Back in 1973, with a potential upsurge in freight traffic, possibly also associated with the oil industry in the North Sea, British Rail identified a need for a heavy-duty Type 5 class of locomotive, and various options were considered. The Brush Falcon Works at Loughborough, under the direction of Hawker Siddeley and their Romanian counterparts Electroputeer, had an off-the-shelf design. It was based a bit on the body shell of the Class 47. However, the Class 56 project must not be thought of as an extension of the Class 47 project. There are quite a lot of differences. The Class 56, as it was to become, would be an 80 miles an hour, 3,250 brake horsepower locomotive, designed primarily and purely for freight workings. It did occasionally go on to passenger work, but more about that shortly. It was therefore not a mixed traffic machine, but a purely freight only machine, and the first diesel locomotive of its type to be designated as such. Therefore it had no train heating facilities in it, and there was no electric train supply equipment in it. And I've been told that because of the size of the Ruston Paxman engine and the radiator and cooling equipment, it's such a tight fit that putting ETS into this machine would be almost impossible. To test out the Ruston Paxman engine, a locomotive test bed was required. This came about in 1975 when 47046 was damaged in an accident and spent several months out of service awaiting repairs. It was decided that this would become the engine testbed locomotive for the Ruston Paxman engine, and 47601, as she was duly christened, came out. It had some of the radiator panels were the same as on a normal Class 47, but the majority of them were like this you see here. It still had the grills here and fans at the same place, and it was purely a test bed engine. It was allocated to Bristol Bath Road and worked primarily freights in the South West and South Wales area. Once the design of the Class 56 had been finalised, there was a small question of getting it built, and this failed initially to two companies. There was to be an initial order for 60 locomotives. 30 of them were to be built by the Brush Falcon Works. Unfortunately, Brush were also tied up dealing with other work at the same time, unrelated to the railway, so a decision was made that they would subcontract this out to Electroputeer in Romania. The initial 60 locomotives would be built in Romania and the UK, with BRAL's Doncaster Works building the other 30. Detailed differences do exist between the Romanian ones and the UK built ones. This is clearly a UK built example. The main detail differences concern the window grills, the window arrangement. As you can see here in this UK one, the whole of the driver's window, cab side window, is one piece. Well, this is the second man's one, with a dividing column. On the 30 Romanian built ones, this small angled window is a completely separate unit with a grommet, and then there's a sliding window here, and it's rubber grommets round the doors on the Romanian ones, whereas these ones built in the UK were built with the whole item as one piece and no use of rubber grommets. It was 1976 that the first ones arrived, and the Romanian ones suffered from poor build quality. This resulted in them having to be taken out of service to get repair work done, and some of them were out of service for several months. Now, the British built examples, the main structures were built at Doncaster, with the final 30, 56105 to 35, being built at Crewe. However, other parts of the locomotives were built elsewhere. Control desks were built at Eastleigh, for instance. The Chart Leakin Works at Ashford and Swindon Works all built components to go into these machines, but they are primarily a Doncaster machine or a Crewe machine. 56055 was the last one to be built with an aluminium cab, and this can be denoted by the grille on the front. Camera doesn't pick up well at that end, but you may just be able to see if I go in there that there is a full-size horn grille on 56135. 5601001 to 55 had a half-sized horn grille. They were built with aluminium cabs. The remaining locomotives had steel cabs, which explains the larger grille. But there's been a few cases where cabs have had to be repaired because of accident damage, and where it was a half-sized grille, it got replaced with a full-sized grille. So you could have an example of a Class 56 with two different sized horn grilles. In 1982, the very first Class 58s to carry the large logo blue livery from New were delivered, although 56036 was the first one to be repainted into large logo blue at Stratford in 1978. The final order was this one here, 56135, and it carried the large logo rail freight grey livery from New, with others being repainted as required. 56135 was unique in its large logo was in the middle of the locomotive, whereas on other rail freight grey 56s it was towards this end here. The position of the rail freight logo here was that or similar to that on a Class 47, making this one for a little while unique. It somehow just didn't look right on the 56, whereas it looked fine on a 47, but I don't know why. During the construction of the Class 56s, there was also a development plan for the Class 58, which was to be, again, a heavy Type 5 freight locomotive, but it was to be of modular construction, and these got nicknamed the Bones. That nickname came about because it had two cabs at either end that were wider than the actual bodywork of the locomotive. So if you think about a dog's bone, for instance, you get the idea. Whilst it was to get a new uprated Ruston Paxman engine, which went into 47601 as a trial, that became 47901. It was also proposed to use a different bogie design to that on the Class 56s. The prototype was called CP1, and 56042 was the locomotive chosen to carry these trial bogies. Because of the shape of the bogies, it was necessary to alter the frame on 56042 to take the CP1 bogies, which meant that it would never be able to carry normal Class 56 bogies. In fact, the bogies that went into the Class 58s were an updated version of the CP1. It was the CP3, and this made the CP1s unique on Class 56042. It also meant that with there being no spare bogies available, if there was to be work done in the bogies, it couldn't be changed over. It was out of use for several months. Non-standard Class 56s have never had non-standard locomotives have never had a long career on British Rail, and that was the case with 56042. The locomotive was withdrawn with bogie faults in 1990 and was progressively stripped to provide spares for its classmates. Officially condemned in 1991, it was cut up at Totten Depot in 1994. Before moving away from the Class 56 story, just a couple of things to mention to you. It was actually found to be a pretty powerful and good locomotive to operate, but it was also found to be pretty expensive to maintain, and reliability was well below the 80% mark in some cases. It was this that led to Foster Yeoman purchasing their 4, later to be 5, Class 59 locomotives, which had at sometimes a 95% availability rate, and the reliability of them was superb. The forerunner of the Class 66. These locomotives, when delivered, replaced not just 135 older locomotives, but slightly more than that, because of course there was no need for double heading. Whilst not used or designed for passenger work, Class 56s have occasionally been used on British Rail in passenger service. At weekends, when there's weekend engineering work taking place and lots of freight trains aren't running, the class would sometimes be called upon to haul electric trains on weekend diversions on non-electrified routes. Very occasionally they would be called upon to haul a train that had broken down or to substitute for traction. 56035 became a minor celebrity on that regard in 1990 when one day to cover for a failed Class 56, 56035 hauled the 1318 Salisbury to London Waterloo service. Despite its 80 miles per hour top speed, it was only 5 minutes down when it reached Waterloo, and it hauled the return working on the diagram later on that day as well. But more often than not, these would be found working rail tours in passenger service, and their rust and packsman scream, while similar to that of a HST, was not as fast as a HST, but it was a good experience nonetheless for the passengers on the rail tour. The Class 56s in British Rail service did carry quite a small number of liveries. 56036 was the first one to carry large logo blue as an experiment in 1978, but they'd originally all been outshopped in what was called BR blue with the small logo. I've already mentioned to you about the Rail Freight grey livery, which was applied to this locomotive from new, and then from 1987 onwards they were given the Rail Freight subsector livery, the triple grey livery. Again, this is the locomotive on the fleet that carries it. It was in the early 1990s that a small number of these entered the Civil Engineering Department service, and they were repainted into what's known as a Dutch livery, dark grey with a yellow band, where the mid-grey band is on this locomotive. 47346 on the layout is a good example of that. Naturally enough, with a big fleet like this, there have been the occasional mishap with the locomotives, and one or two accidents did occur. The most notable was in 1988 at Haywards Heath, I believe it was, in Sussex, when 56062 derailed and slid down an embankment, fortunately without any fatalities. Recovery was a major job, and I think it was about 5 months it took to actually finally recover the locomotive, which was completely battered. The power unit had to be taken out first and then taken to Doncaster. Then the locomotive had to be lifted upright and carefully taken onto a lorry to get taken back to Doncaster. A temporary road had to be built to actually reach the site. Doncaster works said that the locomotive would be returned and repairs completed in a shorter time than what it took to recover the locomotive. And they were right. 56062 was returned to service in less than 4 months in rail freight construction livery, and that locomotive later got named Mount Sorrel after Redland Aggregates quarry there. I've temporarily uncoupled the locomotive from its regional railway stock now so you can get a better view of it. The locomotive is a Hornby example, and it was purchased from the North Road train stall at the Cupar Model Railway Club Christmas show. However, this was actually on the box an Olivia Trains renumbering, and that can be quite clearly seen with the 135 at the end. It's a little bit squint, but I can live with that. The locomotive on the box, it said that it had its DCC sound decoder removed. To prove that it had no decoder in it, the gentleman that runs the North Road train stall put it on a layout opposite the stall, and there was, although the lights came on, there was no power, propulsion of the locomotive. Jim down at Scoonie Hobbies in Kirkcaldy has installed a decoder into this locomotive for me, and thank you very much once again, Jim. The locomotive carries the rail freight coal livery and is the first loco in the fleet to do so. I don't know what its previous number was, but as you can see, it now carries number 56135, Port of Tyne Authority, and actually also has the Port of Tyne Authority logo at the time above it. It has etched nameplates, the etched BR symbol, and at the other end, and I'll just take the camera up, I hope you can see that clearly, the Totten depot crest as well. Once again, it's etched. There's no detailing fitted to either side. In fact, I actually fell out at the Scoonie Hobby shop as Jim was putting the decoder in, but I need to have couplings at both ends because of the type of layout that I've got here. It's a 6-track terminal station, so I can't possibly have a locomotive with detailing at one end and a coupler at the other. It's not possible to do that. The locomotive has been weathered in some areas more subtly than others, but you can see it's not been overdone. I'm presuming that Olivia's Trains done that. You can see where the bogies are. They're covered in brake dust and bogie dirt, and there's some dirt around the cooling grills here. And if we go into the top, you can see simulate the smoke that's come out of the exhaust ports as well. It's been really well done, that there. As I say, they haven't went over the top with it. I must admit that the majority of my locomotives on the fleet are of a pristine condition. I don't have any facilities to weather locomotives, and being autistic, I do think I wouldn't have the patience either to weather the locomotives either. But they've done a fantastic job here with 56135. The engine itself has also got small amounts of weathering on either end here. The red diamond multiple working equipment there, picked out beautifully. There's no crew installed inside the locomotive I'm not bothered about that, but the Hornby body is easy to take off if you do wish to actually add a member of staff to the locomotive. It runs very well. I've given it a quick test here on the layout, and what I'll do is, the actual layout's a little bit crowded now, but I've got room to put a locomotive and some coaching stock into platform 2, so I think that's what we'll do next. We'll be able to see how she goes over the point work that takes you from the depot into platform number 2, so that'll be the next job that I'll be doing. Get the points set ready for her. The only slight thing I could notice is that this moves a little bit there, but that doesn't affect the performance of the locomotive, which is I'm very pleased to have on the layout. It also completes the set of 5 main subsectors of rail freight. The 6th one, of course, rail freight general, was only short-lived and didn't really fit in. So I do now have the set, and the livery that's on this will be an interesting comparison with the style of the Class 60 coal livery, which you'll see later this year. If there's anybody that's a fan of the Class 56 out there, by the way, and I'm pretty sure a lot of you are, Bachmann, Hornby, Cavalex and Accurascale have all brought out Class 56s, and therefore you're spoilt for choice for them. They'll look just at home hauling a set of Foster Yeoman wagons as they will working on intercity charter set on a rail tour, or a set of HAA hopper wagons to hauling empty stock for a regional railways service. I'm mentioning that because that's what I'm going to do now. We'll get the train brought into platform 2, and then I'll send 47346, I think I'll send, to come out and collect couple up to the stock. There we go, so that's in, and I've got 47346 in. Now I didn't film all of the journey because there was a couple of bits of trouble. I've got a couple of areas of the point work where I'll need to clean the track, and also there's problems with these regional railways coaches. I have said, however, that I'm going to replace these with the Accurascale ones when I can start to get a hold of them. But it did perform okay. I've gave the wheels a clean off camera, and you saw I had a little bit of a struggle getting it away there from the depot, but again, that's the track is likely to need cleaning, and I've got 2 track cleaning wagons that can do that job, so they'll be set onto that. But it performed well when it started to get going, and I'm very pleased with it. There are functions that you can use to try and get the locomotive to work. Now if I just try and place the camera there somehow, and there we go. I don't know if any of these functions work, so Jim and myself weren't sure what functions would be what there, but you can see there we're not getting any sorts of tail lights on the locomotive. It would help if I actually hit the right locomotive, wouldn't it? I've just chosen 500 rather than 135, but let's have a go. Function 0, I don't know what it'll do. And see, Jim and myself weren't sure what functions will do what, but we've no doubt we'll find that out eventually. I think what I'll do is I'll report back to you on that in the future as to what functions do what. In fact, there we go. So we've got the headlights there working. I've managed to work it now. The only thing I've noticed is that the rear, the front and tail lights are working simultaneously. I'll just have to live with that. It's very rare I actually use one of these functions on the locomotive, but at least I've made a start on what it is. As I say, it was originally fitted with a sound decoder, but Olivia's Trains took that out. It's a non-sound fitted decoder that's in this machine, so I just need to make that very clear to you. Just by contrast, before I finish up, there is the Bachmann version of the Rail Freight triple grey livery on an immaculate 47004, and if you contrast that with there, you can see how work stained it is. So that's a contrast for you. And that's the livery that was worn by some of the Class 56s when they were transferred to the departmental sector from 1992 onwards. Okay, well there you go. That's your Hornby Class 56 56135, the new grid on the block. I'm off to do some work now for the January 2025 update. So I'd just like to say thank you very much for watching. If you haven't already done so, please consider subscribing and ringing the bell icon so you can be notified of when new videos appear on this YouTube channel. It's at least one per calendar month. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and as I say, thank you very much indeed for watching. Please do take care of yourselves, won't you? And enjoy your layouts. Cheerio!